So it's going to be a little bit of a quicker video, but I wasn't even sure if it was worth the video, but I think it is, because it's interesting that we didn't know this before, and Nintendo was just like, oh, by the way, you can't do this with the Switch 1 controllers on the Switch 2 console. And that's kind of what we're talking about. We talked a lot about this. I talked about the Pro controller, the Switch 1 Pro controller versus the Switch 2 Pro controller. If you missed that, I'll link that video down in the description below. Hopefully I remember to do that. We've been hammering out a lot of videos here on the channel for Nintendo Switch 2 and everything else Nintendo. It's been a good time. Stick around for more if you do enjoy the content. But what am I talking about? Well, let's go to Nintendo's website, and it's so random. Okay, so we're going on Nintendo's website. This is a website specifically for Switch 2 transfer guide. It's a guide on how to transfer your Switch 1 data to Switch 2. We talked a little bit about this in another video as well, but this is a whole kind of, kind of fleshed out guide and how that's going to work. And to kind of, make things a little bit, I guess, easier for the consumer. They do say that, you can transfer everything from the Switch to the Switch 2. You can also continue to play compatible Nintendo Switch games and use Nintendo Switch Joy-Con and Pro controllers on Switch 2. So they are mentioning that, and that's probably why they mentioned this later on. But it's a transfer thing, but then they mention something about the controllers that is kind of the main point I want to make. But again, there's a whole thing in terms of game compatibility they're talking about, and system transfer. They're saying using the system transfer feature, you can easily transfer any digital games you've purchased to your Nintendo Switch 2 along with save data. You can also transfer parental controls, other settings, everything like that. So it's just really useful. It sounds like they're making the system transfer a little bit more streamlined and a little bit smoother of a process, and hopefully quicker of a process. So that, really quick, they also talk about what can be transferred, user profiles, purchase digital games, game save data, your screenshots and videos. So that's probably something that a lot of people will care about. Personally, I do care about that, because it's it's stuff that I have, it's nostalgic to some extent, right? Parental controls and all that good stuff. It talks about the games and all that. And then of course he talks about, this is separate, but talks about, paid upgrades for Nintendo Switch games, free updates for Nintendo Switch games, select Nintendo Switch games, which we've talked about before, just basically to make the games a little bit smoother. And then they talk about Nintendo Switch Online. And then when you get to the very bottom, parental controls, all this, you finally get to the bottom, and they have this little itty bitty tiny little note about controllers that was not mentioned, as far as I'm aware, anywhere else, which is kind of interesting. So we can see Joy-Cons from the Switch 1, Pro controller from the Switch 1, and this is what it says. You can continue using your existing controllers. If you didn't know that, well, now you know. Nintendo Switch 2 games, Nintendo Switch 2 comes with a pair of Joy-Con 2 controllers in the box, and compatible games may also be played with Nintendo Switch controllers, such as Nintendo Switch Pro controller Joy-Con. Now, they do note that some features you're not going to be able to use. So, mouse controls, you can't use the original Joy-Cons. Obviously, it's mouse controls, right? They say that. Fine print. Nintendo Switch controllers are also compatible with Switch 2 exclusive games. So you can play any game that's like Donkey Kong Bonanza, maybe, but it cannot be used if the game requires features such as Joy-Con 2, mouse controls, they know. So, for example, Air Hockey and Mario Party, Jamboree, which is a new game mode they're going to be coming out with for Switch 2. You can't play that with the original Joy-Cons. You're going to need Switch 2 Joy-Cons if you want to play that. They also say, this is the interesting part that I wanted to point out. You cannot, and I don't understand this, you cannot exit sleep mode on Nintendo Switch 2 using the home button on Nintendo Switch controllers, such as the Joy-Con and Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which is very confusing. So if you don't know, I'm sure most of you know this, but if you don't know, if you hold down the home button on your controller, it'll basically awaken your Switch from its slumber, from its sleep. But for some reason, and I don't get why this is not going to work, that's the part that leaves me scratching my head. And if you guys have an idea as to why, please let me know. But for some reason, if you're using a Switch 1 controller with the Switch 2, so some people are saying, I don't want to get the Switch 2 Pro controller. I think a lot of people are getting the Switch 2 Pro controller, but some people are probably just going to be like, I'm just going to use my Switch 1 Pro controller. But then you got the issue that you cannot awaken your Switch 2 from sleep with your Switch 1 Pro controller or Joy-Cons, which again, I'm not fully sure why that makes sense. I don't fully get that. It doesn't, it's just the home button, but I don't know. It is what it is. Apparently you can't do that. You can connect the controllers, you can use them with any game compatible, but you can't awaken your console from its slumber. And then the last thing, you know, controllers without a C button, you can't open the game chat like that, but you can do that by going from the home menu, because there is the game chat kind of icon in the home menu, which we talked about in the UI video. If you missed that video, check it out. So I don't know, let me know your thoughts about this. Does this really matter to you? I know it's kind of this seems insignificant, and it's like, why, some people are gonna be like, why make a video on that? But again, I'm trying to keep you guys up to date, and there's a few extra tidbits in here we threw in with the, you know, game transfer stuff as well. And just curious what you guys think, because it left me scratching my head. It's just one of those why Nintendo kind of moments, right? And again, one of those things where it's like, there's just so many things we just don't realize about this, and this is in fine print. You wouldn't, like, most people won't know about this unless they try it out for themselves day one. So I don't know, it's weird, but let me know your thoughts. Stick around for more. Until the next one, game on. See you guys soon.